Vientiane, Laos. Just outside the city, there is a remarkable statue garden on the banks of the Mekong River. It contains over 200 ornate and often bizarre statues meant to represent characters spoken of in Hindu and Buddhist lore. It's a place known as Xiang Kuan, or Buddha Park.
Xiang Kuan was crafted in the 1950s by a visionary. He was a priest, a shaman. He was deeply immersed in Buddhist as well as Hindu theology. So he filled this park with all of these sculptures of fantastical creatures, mythological entities, some of which have a technological sort of aesthetic. So their faces look robotic. They have like big robotic eyes and sort of robotic head.
In Buddhist lore, there are a number of stories about robot guardians. One of the most famous stories talks about a king who wanted to protect a prized treasure that he had, and this treasure was relics of the Buddha. And so he built a robot army that had spinning blades and would cut down any intruder or any would-be thief. I mean, Buddhism is a 2,500-year-old religion, but it had descriptions of what can only be defined as robots. So what are we to make of this story?
The strange statues at Buddha Park raise a fascinating question. Are the mechanical guardians found in ancient Hindu and Buddhist texts descriptions of what we would call robots? While it may sound far-fetched, robots have appeared in myths and legends all throughout the ancient world.
There's a very fascinating story recorded in the ancient Chinese work, the Liezi, and it tells the tale of a king from the 10th century BC who has what was called an artificer, which is a mechanical engineer, essentially, who ended up creating what was, for the time, a perfect lifelike robot. This artificer by the name of Yan Shi came and presented it to the court, and it completely fooled everyone. The robot could sing on cue, it could dance and keep time. And then towards the end of its performance, the robot started winking at the king's concubines, and the king obviously was rather displeased by this, and he was about to execute this artificer. So in a bid to save his life, Yan Shi opened up his automaton to show the king that it was not a real person, it's just a robot.
Stories of robot-like creations can also be found in ancient Greece, where giant programmable machines were called automatons.
Automaton comes from the Greek term automatos, which is made up of auto, which means self, and matos, which means thinking or willing. So together, the term translates as self-thinking or self-willing. And it refers to any device that plays out a mechanical sequence that has been programmed for it. They seem to be describing a robot.
Automata were written about in ancient Greek epic poetry like the Iliad, like the Odyssey, and other historical works. Things like gigantic moving statues that might also be fountains that would dispense wine or milk, for example. And there were these wheeled cauldrons, which were like cupbearers, wine servants. They would scurry around and serve the gods on Mount Olympus. So it's really interesting to think about whether or not these objects that are written about, if they're actually were made, or if they're sort of a version of fantasy or science fiction.
Are automatons simply creations of the imagination? Or could there be a possibility that they once walked the earth? Some believe a clue can be found by examining an ancient Greek work called the Argonautica from the 3rd century BC. It describes a giant mechanical man known as Talos.
One of the most terrifying creations of the Greek gods was this massive bronze automaton called Talos. It operates completely as a robot, as we'd understand it. And Talos was programmed to walk around the island of Crete 3 times a day, protecting it from pirates and invaders. Talos would throw massive boulders at the ships and sink them. Or Talos could even heat himself up and burn his enemies to death.
Talos was given life, and his power came from this ichor, as it's called, this blood of gods. And it coursed through his body through a series of channels. And there was one spot in the body that you could take out this ichor substance, and that was basically secured by a bolt in its ankle. So the parallels between Talos and what we could see as more modern robots are very striking, especially if you replace this notion of the ichor with engine oil, something of that nature, a lubricant. Then you have pretty much a description of what a metallic robot would look like.